Letter 3 by Charles Lamb. Begun Wednesday, June 8, dated on address, Friday 10th June, 1796. With Joan of Arc I have been delighted, amazed. I had not presumed to expect anything of such excellence from Southey. Why the poem is alone sufficient to redeem the character of the age we live in from the imputation of degenerating in poetry, were there no such beings extant as Burns and Bowles, Cowper, and fill up the blank how you please, I say nothing. The subject is well chosen. It opens well. To become more particular, I will notice in their order a few passages that chiefly struck me on perusal. Page 26, fierce and terrible benevolence, is a phrase full of grandeur and originality. The whole context made me feel possessed, even like Joan herself. Page 28, it is most horrible with the keen sword to gore the finely fibered human frame, and what follows pleased me mightily. In the 2D book, the first 40 lines, in particular, are majestic and high-sounding. Indeed, the whole vision of the Palace of Ambition and what follows are supremely excellent. Your simile of the Laplander by Nemes Lake or Balder-Giac, or the mossy stone of Sulphur Kappa, will bear comparison with any in Milton for fullness of circumstance and lofty pacedness of versification. Southey's similes, though many of them are capital, are all inferior. In one of his books, the simile of the oak in the storm occurs, I think, 4 times. To return, the light in which you view the heathen deities is accurate and beautiful. Southey's personifications in this book are so many fine and faultless pictures. I was much pleased with your manner of accounting for the reason why monarchs take delight in war. At the 447th line, you have placed prophets and enthusiasts cheek by jowl, on too intimate a footing for the dignity of the former. Necessary and like speaking it is correct. Page 98, dead is the Douglas, cold thy warrior frame, illustrious Buchan, and sea are of kindred excellence with Gray's, cold is Cadwallow's tongue, and sea. How famously the maid baffles the doctors, seraphic and irrefragable, with all their trumpery. 126 page, the procession, the appearances of the maid, of the bastard son of Orleans and of Tremoil, are full of fire and fancy, and exquisite melody of versification. The personifications from line 303 to 309 in the heat of the battle had better been omitted. They are not very striking and only encumber. The converse which Joan and Conrad hold on the banks of the Loire is altogether beautiful. Page 313, the conjecture that in dreams all things are that seem is one of those conceits which the poet delights to admit into his creed. A creed, by the way, more marvelous and mystic than ever Athanasius dreamed of. Page 315, I need only mention those lines ending with, she saw a serpent gnawing at her heart. They are good imitative lines. He toiled and toiled, of toil to reap no end, but endless toil and never-ending woe. 347 page, cruelty is such as Hogarth might have painted her. Page 361, all the passage about love, where he seems to confound conjugal love with creating and preserving love, is very confused and sickens me with a load of useless personifications. Else that 9th book is the finest in the volume, an exquisite combination of the ludicrous and the terrible. I have never read either, even in translation, but such as I conceive to be the manner of Dante and Ariosto. The 10th book is the most languid. On the whole, considering the celerity wherewith the poem was finished, I was astonished at the infrequency of weak lines. I had expected to find it verbose. Joan, I think, does too little in battle, Dunois, perhaps, the same, Conrad too much. The anecdotes interspersed among the battles refresh the mind very agreeably, and I am delighted with the very many passages of simple pathos abounding throughout the poem, passages which the author of Crazy Kate might have written. Has not Master Southey spoke very slightingly in his preface and disparagingly of Cowper's Homer? What makes him reluctant to give Cowper his fame? And does not Southey use too often the expletives did and does? They have a good effect at times, but are too inconsiderable, or rather become blemishes, when they mark a style. On the whole, I expect Southey one day to rival Milton. I already deem him equal to Cowper, and superior to all living poets besides. What says Coleridge? The monody on Henderson is immensely good. The rest of that little volume is readable and above mediocrity. I proceed to a more pleasant task. Pleasant because the poems are yours, pleasant because you impose the task on me, and pleasant, let me add, because it will confer a whimsical importance on me to sit in judgment upon your rhymes. First, though, let me thank you again and again in my own and my sister's name for your invitations. Nothing could give us more pleasure than to come, but were there no other reasons? While my brother's leg is so bad it is out of the question. Poor fellow, he is very feverish and light-headed, but Cruikshanks has pronounced the symptoms favorable and gives us every hope that there will be no need of amputation. God send not. We are necessarily confined with him the afternoon and evening till very late, so that I am stealing a few minutes to write to you. Thank you for your frequent letters. You are the only correspondent, and I might add the only friend I have in the world. I go nowhere and have no acquaintance. Slow of speech and reserved of manners, no one seeks or cares for my society, and I am left alone. Alan calls only occasionally, as though it were a duty rather, and seldom stays 10 minutes. Then judge how thankful I am for your letters. Do not, however, burthen yourself with the correspondence. I trouble you again so soon, only in obedience to your injunctions. Complaints apart, proceed we to our task. I am called away to tea, thence must wait upon my brother, so must delay till tomorrow. Farewell, Wednesday. Thursday, I will first notice what is new to me. 13th page. The thrilling tones that concentrate the soul is a nervous line, and the 6 first lines of page 14 are very pretty. The 21st effusion a perfect thing, that in the manner of Spenser is very sweet, particularly at the close. The 35th effusion is most exquisite, that line in particular, and tranquil muse upon tranquillity. It is the very reflex pleasure that distinguishes the tranquillity of a thinking being from that of a shepherd. A modern one I would be understood to mean a Dametas, one that keeps other people's sheep. Certainly, Coleridge, your letter from Sherton Bars has less merit than most things in your volume. Personally, it may chime in best with your own feelings, and therefore you love it best. It has, however, great merit. In your 4th epistle, that is an exquisite paragraph and fanciful of a stream there is which rolls in lazy flow, and sea, murmurs, sweet undersong mid jasmine bowers, is a sweet line, and so are the 3 next. The concluding simile is far-fetched. Tempest honored is a quaintish phrase. Of the monody on H, I will here only notice these lines as superlatively excellent. That energetic one, shall I not praise thee, scholar, Christian friend, like to that beautiful climax of Shakespeare, King, Hamlet, Royal Dane, Father, yet memory turns from little men to thee, and sported careless round their fellow child. The whole, I repeat it, is immensely good. Yours is a poetical family. I was much surprised and pleased to see the signature of Sarah to that elegant composition, the 5th epistle. I dare not criticize the relig musings. I like not to select any part where all is excellent. I can only admire, and thank you for it in the name of a Christian as well as a lover of good poetry. Only let me ask, is not that thought and those words in Young stands in the sun, or is it only such as Young in one of his better moments might have writ? Believe thou, O my soul, life is a vision, shadowy of truth, and vice and anguish and the wormy grave, shapes of a dream. I thank you for these lines in the name of a necessarian, and for what follows in next paragraph in the name of a child of fancy. After all, you cannot nor ever will write anything with which I shall be so delighted as what I have heard yourself repeat. You came to town, and I saw you at a time when your heart was yet bleeding with recent wounds. Like yourself, I was sore galled with disappointed hope. You had, many and holy lay, that morning, soothed the mourner on his way. I had ears of sympathy to drink them in, and they yet vibrate pleasant on the sense. When I read in your little volume, your 19th effusion, or the 28th or 29th, or what you call the sigh, I think I hear you again. I image to myself the little smoky room at the Salutation and Cat, where we have sat together through the winter nights, beguiling the cares of life with poesy. When you left London, I felt a dismal void in my heart. I found myself cut off at one and the same time from 2 most dear to me. How blessed with ye the path could I have trod of quiet life. In your conversation, you had blended so many pleasant fancies that they cheated me of my grief. But in your absence, the tide of melancholy rushed in again and did its worst mischief by overwhelming my reason. I have recovered, but feel a stupor that makes me indifferent to the hopes and fears of this life. I sometimes wish to introduce a religious turn of mind, but habits are strong things, and my religious fervors are confined, alas, to some fleeting moments of occasional solitary devotion. A correspondence, opening with you, has roused me a little from my lethargy and made me conscious of existence. Indulge me in it. I will not be very troublesome. At some future time, I will amuse you with an account as full as my memory will permit of the strange turn my frenzy took. I look back upon it at times with a gloomy kind of envy, for while it lasted, I had many hours of pure happiness. Dream not, Coleridge, of having tasted all the grandeur and wildness of fancy till you have gone mad. All now seems to me vapid, comparatively so. Excuse this selfish digression. Your monody is so superlatively excellent that I can only wish it perfect, which I can't help feeling it is not quite. Indulge me in a few conjectures. What I am going to propose would make it more compressed, and I think more energetic, though I am sensible at the expense of many beautiful lines. Let it begin, is this the land of song-ennobled line? And proceed to Otway's famished form. Then the Chatterton, to blaze of seraphim, then, clad in nature's rich array, to orient day, then, but soon the scathing lightning, to blighted land. Then, sublime of thought, to his bosom glows. Then, but soon upon his poor unsheltered head did penury her sickly mildew shed, and soon are fled the charms of vernal grace, and joy's wild gleams that lightened o'er his face. Then, youth of tumultuous soul, to sigh as before, the rest may all stand down to gaze upon the waves below. What follows now may come next, as detached verses, suggested by the monody, rather than a part of it. They are indeed in themselves very sweet, and we at sober eve would round the throng, hanging enraptured on thy stately song. In particular, perhaps, if I am obscure you may understand me by counting lines. I have proposed omitting 24 lines. I feel that thus compressed it would gain energy, but think it most likely you will not agree with me, for who shall go about to bring opinions to the bed of Procrustes and introduce among the sons of men a monotony of identical feelings? I only propose with diffidence. Reject, you if you please, with as little remorse as you would the color of a coat or the pattern of a buckle where our fancies differed. The lines, friend to the friendless and see, which you may think rudely disbranched, from the Chatterton will patch in with the man of Ross, where they were once quite at home, with two more which I recollect. And o'er the darried virgin's snowy cheek bad bridal love suffuse his blushes meek. Very beautiful. The Pixies is a perfect thing, and so are the lines on the spring, page 28. The epitaph on an infant, like a Jack of Lanthorn, has danced about, or like Dr. Forster's scholars, out of the morn cron into the Watchman, and thence back into your collection. It is very pretty, and you seem to think so, but maybe o'erlooked its chief merit, that of filling up a whole page. I had once deemed sonnets of unrivaled use that way, but your epitaphs, I find, are the more diffuse. Edmund still holds its place among your best verses. Ah, fair delights, to roses round, in your poem called Absence recall, none more forcibly, to my mind the tones in which you recited it. I will not notice in this tedious, to you, manner verses, which have been so long delightful to me, and which you already know my opinion of. Of this kind are Bowles, Priestley, and that most exquisite and most Bowles-like of all, the 19th effusion. It would have better ended with agony of care. The last two lines are obvious and unnecessary, and you need not now make 14 lines of it. Now it is rechristened from a sonnet to an effusion. Schiller might have written the 20 effusion. 'Tis worthy of him in any sense. I was glad to meet with those lines you sent me when my sister was so ill. I had lost the copy, and I felt not a little proud at seeing my name in your verse. The Complaint of Ninethoma, first stanza in particular, is the best or only good imitation of Ossian I ever saw, your restless gale excepted. To an infant is most sweet, is not foodful though very harsh, would not dulcet fruit be less harsh, or some other friendly bisyllable, in Edmund, frenzy fierce-eyed child. Is not so well as frantic, though that is an epithet adding nothing to the meaning. Slander couching was better than squatting. In the Man of Ross it was a better line thus, if neath this roof thy wine-cheered moments pass, than as it stands now. Time nor nothing can reconcile me to the concluding 5 lines of Kosciuszko, call it anything you will but sublime. In my 12th effusion, I had rather have seen what I wrote myself, though they bear no comparison with your exquisite lines on rose-leafed beds amid your fairy bowers, and see. I love my sonnets because they are the reflected images of my own feelings at different times. To instance, in the 13th, how reason reeled, and see, are good lines, but must spoil the whole with me who know it is only a fiction of yours, and that the rude dashings did in fact not rock me to repose. I grant the same objection applies not to the former sonnet, but still, I love my own feelings. They are dear to memory, though they now and then wake a sigh or a tear. Thinking on divers things fordon, I charge you, Carl, spare my ewe lambs, and though a gentleman may borrow 6 lines in an epic poem, I should have no objection to borrow 500, and without acknowledging, still in a sonnet, a personal poem. I do not ask my friend the aiding verse. I would not wrong your feelings by proposing any improvements, did I think myself capable of suggesting them in such personal poems as Thou bleedest my poor heart. Odd so I am catched, I have already done it, but that simile I propose abridging would not change the feeling or introduce any alien ones. Do you understand me? In the 28th, however, and in the sigh, and that composed at Clevedon, things that come from the heart direct, not by the medium of the fancy, I would not suggest an alteration. When my blank verse is finished, or any long fancy poems, propino tibi alterandum, catapandum, abridgendum, just what you will with it, but spare my ewe lambs, that to Mrs. Siddons now you were welcome to improve, if it had been worth it. But I say unto you again, Carl, spare my ewe lambs. I must confess, were they mine I should omit, in editini secunda, effusions 2-3, because satiric, and below the dignity of the poet of religious musings, 5-7 half of the 8th, that written in early youth as far as Thousand Eyes, though I part not unreluctantly with that lively line, chaste joyance dancing in her bright blue eyes, and 1 or 2 more just thereabouts. But I would substitute for it that sweet poem called Recollection in the 5th no. Of the Watchman, better I think than the remainder of this poem, though not differing materially. As the poem now stands, it looks altogether confused, and do not omit those lines upon the early blossom, in your 6th number of the Watchman, and I would omit the 10th effusion, or what would do better, alter, and improve the last 4 lines. In fact, I suppose if they were mine I should not omit 'em. But your verse is for the most part so exquisite that I like not to see aught of meaner matter mixed with it. Forgive my petulance and often, I fear, ill-founded criticisms, and forgive me that I have, by this time, made your eyes and head uck with my long letter. But I cannot forgo hastily the pleasure and pride of thus conversing with you. You did not tell me whether I was to include the conciones ad populum in my remarks on your poems. They are not unfrequently sublime, and I think you could not do better than to turn them into verse, if you have nothing else to do. Alan, I am sorry to say, is a confirmed atheist. Stoddart or Stothard, a cold-hearted, well-bred, conceited disciple of Godwin, does him no good. His wife has several daughters, one of them as old as himself. Surely, there is something unnatural in such a marriage. How I sympathize with you on the dull duty of a reviewer, and heartily damn with you Ned Evans and the prosodist. I shall however wait impatiently for the articles in the Crit. Rev. next month, because they are yours. Young Evans, W. Evans, a branch of a family you were once so intimate with, is come into our office and sends his love to you. Coleridge, I devoutly wish that fortune, who has made sport with you so long, may play one freak more, throw you into London or some spot near it, and there snugify you for life. 'Tis a selfish but natural wish for me, cast as I am on life's wide plain, friendless. Are you acquainted with Bowles? I see, by his last elegy written at Bath, you are near neighbours. And I can think I can see the groves again. Was it the voice of thee? 'Twas not the voice of thee, my buried friend, who dries with her dark locks the tender tear, are touches as true to nature as any in his other elegy, written at the hot wells, about poor Russell and sea. You are doubtless acquainted with it. Thursday. I do not know that I entirely agree with you in your stricture upon my sonnet to innocence. To men whose hearts are not quite deadened by their commerce with the world, innocence, no longer familiar, becomes an awful idea. So I felt when I wrote it. Your other censures, qualified and sweetened though, with praises somewhat extravagant, I perfectly coincide with. Yet I choose to retain the word, lunar, indulge a lunatic in his loyalty to his mistress the moon. I have just been reading a most pathetic copy of verses on Sophia Pringle, who was hanged and burned for coining. One of the strokes of pathos, which are very many, all somewhat obscure, is she lifted up her guilty forger to heaven. A note explains by forger her right hand with which she forged or coined the base metal. For pathos, read bathos, you have put me out of conceit with my blank verse by your religious musings. I think it will come to nothing. I do not like 'em enough to send 'em. I have just been reading a book, which I may be too partial to, as it was the delight of my childhood, but I will recommend it to you. It is Izaak Walton's Complete Angler. All the scientific part you may omit in reading. The dialogue is very simple, full of pastoral beauties, and will charm you. Many pretty old verses are interspersed. This letter, which would be a week's work reading only, I do not wish you to answer in less than a month. I shall be richly content with a letter from you some day early in July, though, if you get anyhow settled before then, pray let me know it immediately. 'Twould give me such satisfaction. Concerning the Unitarian chapel, the salary is the only scruple that the most rigid moralist would admit as valid. Concerning the tutorage, is not the salary low, and absence from your family unavoidable? London is the only fostering soil for genius. Nothing more occurs just now, so I will leave you in mercy one small white spot empty below, to repose your eyes upon, fatigued as they must be with the wilderness of words they have by this time painfully travelled through. God love you, Coleridge, and prosper you through life, though mine will be loss if your lot is to be cast at Bristol, or at Nottingham, or anywhere but London. Our loves to Mrs. C. Southey's Joan of Arc, with contributions to Book Roman II, by Coleridge, had been published in quarto by Cottle. Coleridge contributed to Book Roman II the first 450 lines, with the exception of 141-143, 148-22, 266-72, and 286-91. He subsequently took out his lines and gave them new shape as the poem, The Destiny of Nations, printed in Sibylline Leaves, 1817. All subsequent editions of Southey's poem appeared without Coleridge's portion. The passages on page 26 and page 28 were Southey's. Those at the beginning of the second book were Coleridge's. The simile of the Laplander may be read in The Destiny of Nations, lines 60-79. These were the reasons given by Coleridge for monarchs making war. When luxury and lust's exhausted stores no more can rouse the appetites of kings, when the low flattery of their reptile lords falls flat and heavy on the accustomed ear, when eunuchs sing and fools buffoonery make, and dancers writhe their harlot limbs in vain, then war and all its dread vicissitudes pleasingly agitate their stagnant hearts. The 447th line was Coleridge's. This is the passage. Whether thy law with unrefracted ray beam on the prophet's purged eye, or if diseasing realms the enthusiast, wild of thought, scatter new frenzies on the infected throng, thou both inspiring and foredooming, both fit instruments and best of perfect end. With page 98 we come to Southey again, the remaining references being to him. The maid baffles the doctors in Book Roman III. Page 126 is in Book Roman IV. The personifications are in Book Roman VI. The converse between Joan and Conrade is in Book Roman IV. Page 313 is at the beginning of Book Roman IX, and pages 315, 347, and 361 are also in Book Roman IX. Southey, in the preface to Joan of Arc, speaking of Homer, says, Pope has disguised him in fop finery, and Cowper has stripped him naked. Crazy Kate is an episode in the task, The Sofa. The monody on John Henderson, by Joseph Cottle, was printed anonymously in a volume of poems in 1795, and again in the Malvern Hill. John Henderson, 1757-1788, was an eccentric scholar of Bristol. The lines praised by Lamb are the 4th, 12th, and 14th. The poem must not be confused with the monody on Henderson, the actor, by G.D. Harley. Lamb now turns again to Coleridge's poems. The poem on the 13th and 14th pages of this little volume was to the Rev. W.J.H. The 21st effusion was that entitled, composed, while climbing the left ascent of Brockley Combe. The 35th effusion is known as the Aeolian Harp. The letter from Sherton Bars is the poem beginning, Nor travels my meandering eye. The 4th epistle is that to Joseph Cottle, Coleridge's publisher and the author of the monody on Henderson, referred to in Coleridge's verses. The lines which Lamb quotes are Cottle's. The poem by Sarah Coleridge is The Silver Thimble. The passage in the Religious Musings, for which Lamb is thankful as a child of fancy, is the last paragraph. Contemplant spirits, Ye that hover o'er with untired gaze the immeasurable fount ebullient with creative deity, and ye of plastic power that interfused roll through the grosser and material mass in organizing surge, holies of God, and what if monads of the infinite mind, I haply journeying my immortal course shall sometime join your mystic choir. Till then I discipline my young novitiate thought in ministeries of heart-stirring song, and I on meditation's heavenward wings soaring aloft I breathe the empyreal air of love, omnific, omnipresent love, whose dayspring rises glorious in my soul as the great sun, when he his influence sheds on the frost-bound waters. The glad stream flows to the ray and warbles as it flows. You came to town soon after his engagement with Sarah Fricker, his heart being still not wholly healed of its passion for Mary Evans. Coleridge had gone to London from Bristol, nominally to arrange for the publication of his Fall of Robespierre, and had resumed intercourse with Lamb and other old Christ's Hospital friends. There he remained until Southey forcibly took him back in January 1795. From what Lamb says of the loss of two friends, we must suppose, in default of other information, that he had to give up his honor at the same time. The loss of reason, however, to which he refers, did not come until the end of the year 1795. The 19th effusion, afterwards called On a Discovery Made Too Late, the 28th, The Kiss, the 29th, imitated from Ossian. Your monody, this not to be confounded with Cottle's monody on Henderson, was Coleridge's monody on Chatterton. Lamb's emendations were not accepted. As regards the Man of Ross, the couplet beginning friend to the friendless ultimately had a place both in that poem and in the monody, but the couplet, and o'er the darried virgin, was never replaced in either. The lines on Spring, page 28, are lines to a beautiful spring. Dr. Forster Faustus was the hero of the nursery rhyme, whose scholars danced out of England into France and Spain and back again. The epitaph on an infant was in the Watchman, number Roman 9. See note on page 62. The poem Edmund is called Lines on a Friend Who Died of a Frenzy Fever Induced by Calumnious Reports. The lines in absence are those in the second stanza of the poem. They run thus. Ah, fair delights, that o'er my soul on memory's wing like shadows fly, ah, flowers, which joy from Eden stole while innocence stood smiling by. But cease, fond heart, this bootless moan, those hours on rapid pinions flown shall yet return, by absence crowned, and scatter livelier roses round. The 19th effusion, beginning Thou bleedest, my poor heart, is known as On a Discovery Made Too Late. The 20th effusion is the sonnet to Schiller. The lines which were sent to Lamb, written in December 1794, are called To a Friend, together with an unfinished poem, Religious Musings. Coleridge's Restless Gale is the imitation of Ossian, beginning, The stream with languid murmur creeps. Foodful occurs thus in the lines to an infant. Alike the foodful fruit and scorching fire awake thy eager grasp and young desire. Coleridge did not alter the phrase. Lamb contributed 4 effusions to this volume of Coleridge's, the 7th, to Mrs. Siddons, written in conjunction with Coleridge, the 11th, 12th, and 13th. All were signed C. L. Coleridge had permitted himself to make various alterations. The following parallel will show the kind of treatment to which Lamb objected. Was it some sweet device of fairy that mocked my steps with many a lonely glade, and fancied wanderings with a fair-haired maid? Have these things been, or what rare witchery, impregning with delights the charmed air, and lighted up the semblance of a smile in those fine eyes? Methought they spake the while soft soothing things, which might enforce despair to drop the murdering knife, and let go by his foul resolve. And does the lonely glade still court the footsteps of the fair-haired maid? Still in her locks the gales of summer sigh, while I forlorn do wander reckless where, and mid my wanderings meet no honor there. Was it some sweet device of fairyland that mocked my steps with many a lonely glade, and fancied wanderings with a fair-haired maid? Have these things been? Or did the wizard wand of Merlin wave, impregning vacant air, and kindle up the vision of a smile in those blue eyes, that seemed to speak the while such tender things as might enforce despair to drop the murthering knife, and let go by his fell resolve? Ah me! The lonely glade still courts the footsteps of the fair-haired maid, among whose locks the west winds love to sigh. But I forlorn do wander, reckless where, and mid my wanderings find no honor there. In effusion 12 Lamb had written. Or we might sit and tell some tender tale of faithful vows repaid by cruel scorn, a tale of true love, or of friend forgot. And I would teach thee, lady, how to rail in gentle sort on those who practice not or love or pity, though of woman born. Coleridge made it. But ah, sweet scenes of fancied bliss, adieu. On roseleaf beds amid your fairy bowers, I all too long have lost the dreamy hours. Beseems it now the sterner muse to woo, if haply she her golden meed impart to realize the vision of the heart. Again in the 13th effusion, written at midnight by the seaside after a voyage, Lamb had dotted out the last 2 lines. Coleridge substituted the couplet. How reason reeled, what gloomy transports rose, till the rude dashings rocked them to repose. Effusion 2, which Lamb would omit, was the sonnet to Burke. Effusion 3, to Mercy on Pitt. Effusion 5, to Erskine. Effusion 7, Lamb and Coleridge's joint sonnet to Mrs. Siddons. And Effusion 8, to Kosciuszko. The lines written in early youth were afterwards called Lines on an Autumnal Evening. The poem called Recollection in The Watchman was reborn as sonnet to the River Otter. The lines on the early blossom were praised by Lamb in a previous letter. The 10th effusion was the sonnet to Earl Stanhope. Godwin was William Godwin, the philosopher. We shall later see much of him. It was Allen's wife, not Stoddart's, who had a grown-up daughter. Ned Evans was a novel in 4 volumes, published in 1796, an imitation of Tom Jones, which presumably Coleridge was reviewing for the Critical Review. Young W. Evans is said by Mr. Dykes Campbell to have been the only son of the Mrs. Evans who befriended Coleridge when he was at Christ's Hospital, the mother of his first love, Mary Evans. Evans was at school with Coleridge and Lamb. We shall meet with him again. William Lyle Bowles, 1760–1850, the sonneteer, who had exerted so powerful a poetical influence on Coleridge's mind, was at this time rector of Cricklade in Wiltshire, 1790–1797, but had been ill at Bath. The elegy in question was elegiac stanzas written during sickness at Bath, December 1795. The lines quoted by Lamb are respectively in the 6th, 4th, 5th, and 19th stanzas. Sophia Pringle, probably the subject of a catneck or other popular broadside. I have not found it. Izaak Walton. Lamb returns to praises of the complete angler in his letter to Robert Lloyd referred to on page 215. The reference to the Unitarian chapel bears probably upon an offer of a pulpit to Coleridge. The tutorship was probably that offered to Coleridge by Mrs. Evans of Darley Hall, no relation to Mary Evans, who wished him to teach her sons. Neither project was carried through.